Specifically looking at side, 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 and angle side. So let's take a look at our postulate. Side, side, side postulate, or SSS, is when if three sides of a triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle then the two triangles are congruent. So what that means, if I know GH is congruent to PQ, GF is congruent to PR, and HF is congruent to QR, I know these triangles are congruent because all three sides are congruent. So let's look at the side angle side postulate. If two sides and an included angle are congruent to two sides and an included angle of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. So for instance, if I know CB is congruent to DF and CA is congruent to DE and angle C and angle D are congruent, since it's two sides are congruent and the included angle are congruent, then I know that they're congruent triangles by side angle side. So let's look at example 1. What information is needed to prove that these triangles are congruent? So far we know that two sides are congruent. So we can know that either angle C is congruent to angle D, and that would be for side angle side, because now we have two sides that are congruent and the included angles are congruent. Or we get to the AB is congruent to EF, so then we have three sides congruent by side, side, side. Are these triangles congruent? So far what we know is AB is congruent to CD and BD is congruent to itself, which is reflexive, but all we know is two sides are congruent. So no, because we don't have enough information. So if we look at this example, I know AB is congruent to BC, AD is congruent to DC, and I also know that BD is congruent to itself because of the reflexive property. Since I know three sides in one triangle is congruent to three sides in the other, I know they're congruent by the side, side, side postulate. Alright, we're going to look at our proof informally. So right now, we know that BA is congruent to CD, and we also know that AC is congruent to DB. So based off of this picture, I also know that BC is congruent to BC because they are the shared side, meaning it's the reflexive property. So now that I know BC is congruent, I know that these triangles are congruent by the side, side, side postulate. Look at our next example. We know that BC is congruent to CD, and we're also given that the angle BCA is congruent to the angle DCA. So we also know, based on our picture, that AC is congruent to AC because it's a shared side, meaning it's the reflexive property. So now we know two sides are congruent in our included angle, So by the side angle side postulate, they are congruent. Let's look at our last example. We know V is the midpoint of UW. Remember, the midpoint means it cuts it in half, so that means UV and VW are congruent. And we also know that TV is congruent to XV. So also based on just this picture, I know that angle TVU is congruent to XVW because they are vertical angles. So now knowing that by side angle side theorem postulate, they are congruent.